Welcome to the Have Good Ripple Effect podcast. Let's jump right in. Hello and welcome back to the Have Good Ripple Effect podcast. I'm Lisa Even, your host, and today I'm joined by Sheri Zevenbergen, one of my favorites. She is a coach and consultant and founder of the Dash Mindset, which I'm really excited to get into today because I think this concept really puts some urgency around creating a life you love. And so I'm excited for you to hear her story, but also to hear some of the concepts that she talks about with teams and in her coaching, because we could all use a little more like sprinkle of what Sheri brings to the table. So Sheri, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. You are one of my favorites too.
I love that. And the first things first, I want to know, tell me about you. I feel like we could do this forever, but give us a little bit of background on who you are, what you do, and a little bit of your journey, maybe a little sprinkling of all of those.
Yeah. So I started out going into accounting and finance. That's what I was going to do. I don't know. It started out in high school. I thought, okay, what am I going to do when I grow up? I'm doing air quotes. And I was organized and I liked numbers. I liked math. So I decided to go down the in high school, I decided to go down the accounting and finance path. And I was really trying to check off the boxes. I felt like there was this checklist of life goals, and I had to go through the checklist. And I met all of the boxes that allowed me to go into accounting. And so I went down that route. I thought, okay, I'm going to be a partner in a big accounting firm, blah, 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 blah. I thought I had to have my life planned out. That was, my intention. Then I was in corporate for about 20 years, and I really loved a lot of the things about corporate, but I wasn't being as me as I wanted to be. And I didn't know how to be more me. I always had this mindset that, I wanted to live my dash, which is what we have between birth and death. And I thought, okay, I'm going to take all the vacations I want to do. I want to, I'm going to spend as much time with my family as I can, with my boys, with my husband, want to travel as much as I can. But I was doing that within kind of a box, and I didn't realize I was boxing myself in. I didn't realize I was even in a box, nor did I realize I could get out of it a little bit. So I was just living running on a treadmill all the time and feeling like, okay, I crossed that box off. I crossed that box off. I crossed that box off. And I was getting all the certifications. I was getting all the letters behind my name because that's what I felt like I should do. But finally, I asked myself, why am I actually doing these things? What could I be doing differently? And so I found a coach myself. That's what actually inspired me to go into coaching. And I realized, wait a minute, she's coaching me. I love coaching people. That's something I've been doing my entire career, but because I wasn't called a coach, I didn't really realize it. So I realized that being a coach was being more me.
Yeah. So I love that. And when you think about kind of that should have done, being on a treadmill, being on that checklist part, do you feel like those were things that you picked up on your own, or did you have family members saying things like, well, you need to pick, accounting and finance, or where did that kind of belief come from that you're like, I must do all the things?
I don't know, because it's not as if anyone ever actually said, okay, Sheri, here's how you're going to live your life. But I felt like it was just kind of this unsaid thing. And my brothers, I have two older brothers, and they were, they went into electrical engineering. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that. So what are my other options? Yeah. And nobody actually walked me through the options. I just kind of always had this mental list of, okay, well, here are the options. Here's what I'm going to do.
I love that. And the other question I'm sitting there imagining,
and I feel like I think a lot of people do.
Yeah. Well, I'm imagining little Sheri being like, here we go. We're doing all of the things. When you realize that you're like, okay, I have this birth to death opportunity here. Was it a big realization, or did you just kind of you're sitting at your desk and you're like, I got to do something different? Because I think that there are people that sometimes believe that in order for change to happen, they would have to give up everything to make their lives so different. And so I would love to hear how it happened for you. And was it kind of gradually that you started to redesign kind of who you are and what you are? Or were you one of those people that was like, peace out, I'm done?
So it was gradual. So so I got to tell you about how I came up with the Dash mindset.
Yeah.
So my husband and I love to travel. We've always loved to travel. My husband called me at one point. I was with my niece and he said, "Hey, do you want to go to Iceland for $200?" And I don't know if you even know this story, Lisa. "Do you want to go to Iceland for $200?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." My niece was standing next to me and I said, "Hey, do you want to go to Iceland with us for $200?" And she said, "Yeah, gotta live your dash." And I was like, "What? I don't, okay. We'll come back to that." And so I said, "Okay, yeah, sign me up. We're going to Iceland. We're taking Kaylee with us. We're taking the boys, $200 is going to be awesome." And so I get off the phone and I ask my niece, I said, what are you talking about this dash? What's this all about? Well, it's so fun. It's especially funny to me because she was in college. She was working at a bar at the time.
Oh,
And her boss at this bar had shared this concept of the dash between what you have between birth and death. And so it's so funny. I learned all this from my niece who's far younger than I am. She's in her 20s working at a bar. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that is my whole theory on life, is living your dash. So then years later, when I'm in this corporate world, figuring out, okay, how do I get myself out of this box? I'm not being as me as I want to be. I'm traveling a lot. I'm living my dash to a certain extent, but how do I work even more into my dash? I realized, wait a minute, I could call my business the Dash Mindset. So it was gradual. I felt like I was living my dash to the extent I could, but I didn't realize how much more I could be living it.
yeah, I love that. I think that's reassuring for people who maybe are sitting there thinking like, well, I can't do it because I can't quit my job and do all of these things. And sometimes it's almost like all or nothing. And what I'm hearing you say is that it is, but it's also a slow like march to get there. I can imagine like starting small and then being like, okay, let's add more and add more and add more. And I love that. I really do.
Well,
Now,
and
tell
I
me.
think that
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I get so excited when I'm talking to you, Lisa.
Yeah.
I would just, one thing that I always found throughout my career was that, I mean, I would take all the vacation because travel is so important to me. And I get so amped up about travel. And so many people I worked with would say, "Oh, I wish I could do that too."
Mm,
And so one, I'd say, well, yeah, I can. I mean, we're going to Iceland for $200. And also, I encourage people to really ask themselves, is that something you really want to do? I mean, I was certain I love to travel. I like to be dropped into a different country, not knowing what the heck's going on. That's something I get really excited about. But some people, I think they want to travel and they don't really. They think they're supposed to be doing these certain things.
mm.
But if they were to really ask themselves what they truly wanted and why they really wanted what they thought they wanted, they might be doing other things. So travel was my outlet. We've always done that. But I think for other people, it might be, maybe they like to bake cookies. Maybe they just want to start baking more cookies. Maybe they want to do, I don't know, volunteering more. It's
Yeah.
different for everyone. I think a lot of people just go to travel,
Yeah,
assuming that's what they're supposed to be doing.
I would agree. I feel like it's like travel and freedom are big ones. And sometimes we forget like the day to day dash type moments that we can create without any money or leaving our house, really. So cool.
Yeah,
And what's your
absolutely.
overall approach to the dash? Like, how do you encourage people? Because if I'm someone that's listening and I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, you've got my attention. Like I certainly have opportunity to maybe redesign some things or try some things. What do you usually encourage people to start thinking about or doing?
Really just self-reflecting and taking that time and giving themselves the space to do self-reflection. And had somebody said this to me, and I'm sure somebody did say this to me 20 years ago, I would have thought, okay, that's a waste of time. You're not accomplishing anything. It's unproductive. I already know what's going on in my head. I don't have to sit and self-reflect and journal, right? But
Yeah.
really that's what I really encourage people to do is think about, ask themselves the questions. What do I really want? Who am I really? Versus who do I believe myself to be or who do other people believe myself to be? And really just thinking through who they truly are. Because we've been
Yeah.
conditioned to be a certain way and we don't really stop and ask ourselves, okay, what do I truly want? Because like you said, it's just all about small adjustments. I don't think everybody should start their own business.
Yeah.
I don't know. It happened for me because I realized, oh my gosh, I'm really passionate about coaching. That's what I really love in my current role. And so I just wanted to do more of that. But I don't think everyone should start their own business. I don't think everyone should be a coach. I think maybe it's just making more of those smaller adjustments in life and doing more of that.
Yeah. Well, and it makes it seem manageable for someone who's like almost contemplating, but yet maybe not quite ready. that makes it easier to, yeah, bite size, like to chew on, really. Absolutely. And give me some examples of like things that you talk about when you're talking about this topic. Like I know you have an approach and you have kind of like your three kind of, pillars or things that you talk about. Hit on those because I think oftentimes when I sit down to self-reflect, I look at a blank page and I'm like, okay, where do I start? And sometimes it's like helping my brain kind of get it out on a piece of paper of like, okay, how do I make this go there? So I'd love to hear a little bit of kind of what you can do to prepare yourself. And then if someone is going to sit down and self reflect, how do they do it?
So, my approach when I'm working with teams is focusing on three different areas. I focus on connection, communication, and congruence. And by connection, I mean connecting with one another on the team and also connecting with the whole purpose of the team and the organization.
Mhm.
Because teams consist of individuals. And so if the individuals aren't connecting with one another and connecting with themselves, which, again, 20 years ago, if somebody had said that, I would have been like, what do you mean connecting with yourself? But, right. It's if people aren't connected with themselves, they don't truly understand themselves, then they can't really connect with one another. So that's connection.
Yeah.
And then congruence is really understanding who you are and living in a congruent way with who you're meant to be, what your values are, what your skills truly are, the ones you actually enjoy, not just the ones you think you should be using. What are your interests? Are you even interested in what you're doing? And what you're just naturally good at. So just living in congruence with who you're really supposed to be. And then communication, and not just communicating more, but communicating in a way that's congruent with who you are and having that authentic connection with one another. So that's how I approach it from a team space. When I'm working with individuals, I have them think through 8 different areas of their life. So what do they want their impact and significance to be overall in their life? So not thinking about from a life standpoint versus, or a home standpoint versus a work standpoint, but just overall in life, what do you want your impact and significance to be? What do you want your mental and physical health to be? What is it now versus what do you want it to be? I have them think about connection and communication. And again, connection with themselves, or excuse me, connection and community, connection with themselves, their connection with the people around them. I have them think through environment and lifestyle. What do they want their overall environment and lifestyle to be? Maybe it's traveling, maybe it's working from home, whatever. Finances, leisure, and personal development and growth. How
Yeah.
do you want to keep growing in your life? Because it doesn't have to be just from a work standpoint, but overall.
I like where you can think through the different parts of your life because I feel like as I was listening to you talking, I was almost running the checklist of like, okay, that one's okay. Probably have opportunity over here. So it gave me a way to almost like think about the different parts of my life and where I could almost do a little bit of reflection in maybe particular areas because sometimes, work will be going really well and I'll feel like, yeah, I'm nailing it. And then other times I'm thinking, family, like even yesterday, I dropped my daughter off at summer camp and I was in a hurry and I was really like, have a great day. Bye. And I left to get on a conference call. And a little part of me after I hung up with that conference call was reflecting back, like, was I too rushed? Was I present for that 2 minutes where I said, "Okay, bye"? And, thankfully, I feel like she came out of camp and didn't even skip a beat. But there was an opportunity that I was realizing, like, mid-moment of, like, "Oh, I could have probably done that better." So I really like that approach, and I think that then allows, like, teams to consider it too of just, how am I showing up in that space? Because I feel like oftentimes we just show up. We don't think about how we're showing up. So I love that area. What do you think is the biggest barrier when you're talking with maybe do individuals and teams again, kind of both lenses? What do you think people say to you that they're like, well, I can't do that? Or, what do you usually get the reaction of when you say, I want you to capitalize on this? How do people find that? Like, what are the different versions of like, I'm assuming some are excited and then some people are like, what?
Oh, absolutely. Most are like, what? So I start with when I'm working with an individual, I start with going through each of those areas of their lives because generally we don't stop to think about it. We're just moving all the time, right? And we're in constant motion and we don't really recognize that we're taking our whole self wherever we go.
Yeah.
And it's not just, okay, now I'm going to be work Lisa and now I'm going to be, mom Lisa. I mean, we're doing that to some extent, but it's still Lisa. Everywhere you go, you're Lisa, right? So
Yeah.
when I walk through each of those areas with people, I just ask them to focus on that particular area. And so, like impact and significance, for instance, what's the impact and significance you want in your overall life?
Mhm.
And that could be from a personal standpoint or a work standpoint. So asking them to think about it in that way kind of throws people because they're thinking, well, they generally our minds go to career, right?
Yeah.
And which is great, but it's like, okay, well, what do you want? What do you want your daughter to think about you, when you're long gone? What sort of
Yeah.
thoughts do you want to leave with the people in your life? And what's the impact and significance you want to make there? So people generally don't know the answer to that question. They until they stop and think about it and think, okay, well, where am I now? Am I, how are things going now? And how do I want them to go instead? So it's really a matter of sitting down and asking yourself those questions
Yeah.
and having a starting point of where am I now and being honest about that. Because if you're starting from a point of, well, here's what I think it should be, then you're not being completely honest with yourself. It's okay. How do you want it to be? And how is it really going right now?
Yeah. And it's funny. I was just talking with a friend yesterday and she said something to the effect of, you have to put in the work. And once you put in the work, like the reward is so much better. And I feel like to some people, this exercise might feel a little bit like work, where it's like that corner of our brain, we're usually like, "Oop, let's shut that off. Like, we just got to get through this day, whether it's dishes or laundry or work assignments or kids' stuff." And it's like, "Oh, no, I can't deal with that yet." And the one thing that I'm hearing you say is, you kind of have to make a little time for the work, even if it's in maybe bite-sized moments. I know, so I wrote a book called Joy is My Job, and one of the first things I started doing was I took a pack of Post-it notes, and I was writing down all the different concepts that I wanted to have in my book, and I feel like after our conversation today, I might pull that stack of Post-its back out and think about it from the dash mindset of, even in my world beyond joy, what do I want that to include? And I love that idea of being able to really kind of think it through. But I also acknowledge to anybody who's listening that's like easier said than done, Sally, right? That there is a little bit of like hardness and maybe a little vulnerability in that because you have to acknowledge the like, well, I haven't been doing the thing, right? I haven't been capitalizing on this experience of life. Would you agree? Do you feel like people experience that or feel that sometimes?
Oh, absolutely. And and one of the things I love about you so much, Lisa, is that you're incorporating joy into every aspect of your life. And sometimes I think as humans, we feel like it's a bucket. Like, okay,
Mm.
now I'm going to have joy, right? And joy is something you can incorporate into all aspects of your life, whether it's career, home, time with your kids, travel, whatever it is. Um, but yeah, we have a hard time just thinking through, okay, what could that look like? And one thing
Yeah.
that I ran into throughout my career was the thought that it has to be something you do someday after you retire. But if you're passionate about baking cookies, you don't have to retire to bake cookies, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you could take steps to do whatever you want. Just be more you and incorporate that into, the life you're already living.
Oh, I love that. Now I have one more question, and then I'm going to ask you to talk to us a little bit about like how people interact with you. But I'm curious about, and I don't think I put this on the free form. So you're welcome to like be like, hey, I'm going to ask you this question. And you would think about the ripple effects because it was your niece, right, who said, "Live your dash." Uh,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
talk about that ripple effect and what it's created. Like, I imagine your eyes kind of, turning to her and being like, "Huh." But like when I think about this podcast being all about good ripple effect, What did she do for you at the end of the day? I just want to acknowledge that little ripple effect right there, because it sounds like she kind of kicked off an amazing journey for you.
Yeah, she kind of helped me put words around something I was already doing and just allowing me to recognize, oh, wait a minute, this is how I really want to live my life. It's not just about traveling, but thinking through, why do I like to travel so much? Why am I doing these things that I love so much? So yeah, and I think it's especially fun because she was in her 20s. So now and she's still in her 20s, but seeing her live it out the way she is, because every time I talk to her, she's like, oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And it's almost like seeing a younger version of myself. She and I are very similar in a lot of ways and very different in a lot of ways, but just seeing that, oh, she gets it. She gets it in her 20s and she's traveling and she's doing the things and spending time with the people she wants to spend time with. So it's just really exciting to see. And it's made it even more exciting to share that with our kids, because we want them to be, adventure seekers and little travelers and just be more of who they are and who they're meant to be.
I love that. And okay, last two questions. Number one is, you had to give the folks listening a homework assignment that they were going to do tomorrow at 2:00. They say, I'm ready. Let's do this dash. What is one small thing that they could do in 20 minutes as homework to start them on this journey?
Grab some paper. And I think paper is actually the best way to journal. And
Yeah.
I'm a typer. I'm much faster at typing. But when I'm actually journaling, different thoughts just kind of fall out of my head.
Yeah.
And so I would say, grab some paper, sit down. It doesn't have to be pretty. Sometimes, we'll think, oh, I need to buy the perfect journal. And, what kind of quotes do I want in it? What color should it be? Just grab a piece of paper and start writing down, what are the things you want out of life?
Yeah.
And not thinking about your current circumstances, but just, breaking down those walls and thinking, okay, if my circumstances weren't what they are right now, what do I want out of life? What do I want people to think about me when I'm 105 years old? What stories do I want people to be telling? Because I knew that one of my stories that I didn't want people saying was, she worked really hard, and then stopped, period. Right. It's like, okay, I wanted more than that. So really just thinking about, okay, when you're 105, what's the story you want to tell?
Yeah.
And just writing some of that stuff down. It doesn't have to take an hour. It doesn't have to be in a particular journal. Just start writing that stuff down and just thinking about it.
I love that. And I would even add to that, if the first time that you do it, you're not great at it, do it again, right? Like, it might take you like 2 or 3 times to sit down and write, because that's certainly how writing a book went for me, that I had to kind of sit and do it a couple of times before it was almost like, just like you'd open a thing of cottage cheese, like, oh, got it. Like, now I know what I'm doing. And so I feel like, encouraging people to like keep doing that would be like something that I would toss in there too. Now, how do people find you?
Absolutely.
How do they engage with you if they are thinking, whether it's coaching or teams? How do they find the amazing Sheri Zevenbergen?
So I'm at the-mindset.com, and you can connect with me there. I have a contact page. I'm also on LinkedIn. And so, yeah, that's how people can find me. And I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing what people, want to do more of. I love hearing who people are and really helping them understand the strengths they already have, what's inside of them already. So they're not just constantly trying to check things off their box. So yeah, the-mindset.com. That's the starting point.
I love that. Well, Sheri, thank you so much for joining us. And if this is the first time you're listening, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Have Good Ripple Effect podcast. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Have Good Ripple Effect podcast. To book me for your next event or get more content like this, visit lisaeven.com. Thanks for listening. Visit lisaeven.com to learn about events and grab a copy of my book, Joy is My Job.